Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Grade 12, this is a video lesson for Practical Research 2, and now we are in Module 4, if I'm not mistaken, Data Collection. Now please, I would like to remind you that if we are talking about this part already, then you should have already submitted your proposal, have already shown me your questionnaire or your survey forms. So please submit that as soon as possible. Okay? So the things that we are going to discuss on this module are different ways of collecting data and the different format of how you can structure your research instrument. Okay? So what is data collection anyway? Data collection involves obtaining relevant information regarding the specified research questions or objectives. It is utilizing research instruments that are either developed or adopted. Now, going back to your requirements, if you are going to develop your own research instrument, remember, you should perform content validity with at least 3 experts validating your questionnaire. Now, if you are going to adopt a research instrument, then you should ask permission to the original author and they should give you that permission. Okay? So, important things to consider. First, which data to collect. But that is already evident, supposedly, in your objectives. Okay? Second, how to collect the data. Now, this is a part of your methodology. Okay? So, the data gathering procedure. So, how are you going to collect the data? Depende actually ito sa inyo. Kasi nga, kayo ang researcher. Okay? Next, who will collect the data? Since this is just a senior high school research paper, and most probably, kukonti lang din yung respondents ninyo, of course, you, as the researcher, will collect the data. But for some other instances, there are different studies that requires a team, perhaps, or other people that will collect the data. Okay? And lastly, when to collect the data. So, kailan? Anong schedule? Lalo na kung malawak masyado yung scope ng iyong study, so you really have to schedule different time frames in order for you to collect the data. Okay? So, research instruments, we have 2 types of research instruments. We have the quantitative research instruments and qualitative research instruments. On the quantitative part, you have questionnaires, interviews, tests, and observation. On the qualitative research instrument naman, you have direct interaction with individuals on a one-to-one basis or direct interaction with individuals in a group setting. So, for example, like FGDs or participation in a certain event or ritual or customs or gathering, depende sa iyong research study. Now, developing or utilizing the research instrument. First, you have to be clear with your research question. And going back to the previous topic that we have talked about, when you are going to give out your research questionnaire, the instructions should be clear. Kasi nga, there might be some error in the data that you will get if the instruction is not clear. Okay, so be clear with your instructions as well as your research question. Next, plan how you will conduct data collection. Especially nowadays, since most probably you will be conducting the research online, then you have to plan. Okay, kailan mo ibibigay ang questionnaire mo? How are you going to get the questionnaire from the respondents and ensure that they indeed answered the questionnaire, to eradicate any bias or error in your data. Next, use appropriate research instruments. That is why we have to develop a research instrument na. We have to finalize what type of research instrument you are going to use. Okay? Next, collect, tabulate, tally, and analyze the data. So just like again on the previous topic, we have said that once you have collected the data, you have to collate and tabulate it in preparation for statistical treatment. And then verify the validity and the reliability of the collected data. You have to ensure that you got the right data. Okay? And the next, present your findings. You have to analyze, interpret the results, and then present your findings. There's a lot of presentations, and we have already discussed that in the previous modules. Like for example, you can present it visually on a line graph perhaps, or bar graph, or pie chart, and other visual graphs that you can use. Okay, so it depends upon you as the researcher. So these are the common data collection methods. So we have questionnaires, tests, interviews, and observations, because these are the common data collection methods in quantitative research. And remember, you have quantitative research for practical research too. So let's delve deeper into the research instruments that you may use for your research studies. Now, first is questionnaire. Ang questionnaire is a series of questions about a research topic to gather data from the participants or your respondents. It consists of indicators that is aligned to the research questions or the research objectives. Because remember, at the end of the day, at the end of your research, you should be able to answer your research questions or your objectives. So that is why you have to inline the questions in your questionnaire so that later on you will get sufficient data to be able to answer your own research questions. Okay? Next, it can be carried out in the following methods, either by face-to-face, by telephone, by email, messenger, social media post, or using computer programs or forms. Depende. So most probably, guys, you will be using Google Forms for this, or SurveyMonkey if you know how to use SurveyMonkey. Because, again, no, I highly advise that you should conduct the study online, okay, for your own safety purposes. Next, you can use a scale or conversions. So, for example, you can use Likert scale, or maybe for things that are categorical, but then you need numbers for it, because again, we have to quantify things. So, for example, you assign 1 for yes or 0 for no, or maybe 1 for male or 2 for female, etc. So, there are different structures of a questionnaire. We have structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. Ang structured questionnaires, they employ close-ended questions. So, what do you mean by close-ended questions? There's no room for narrative or stories. Okay? So, isa lang ang choice na pwede mong sagutan, or given na ang choices, pipili na lang ang respondent. Okay? So, like for example, if you ask, what is your gender? So, it's either male or female, right? So, they can choose either male or female. So, that is close-ended. Okay? Next is unstructured questionnaires. These are open-ended questions naman siya. So, free magsagot ang mga respondents mo kung pwede silang mag-narrate ng isang story or ng isang event or ng isang situation. And they can put in an essay type of answer into your questionnaire. And we have semi-structured questionnaires. It is a combination of both structured and unstructured questionnaire. So, for example, this is an example of a structured questionnaire. So, the question is, which of the following best describes your current relationship status? So, as you can see, you have options given to you. Pero kung iisipin mo, kung i-convert mo ito siya into unstructured na question, you can ask the same question, right? But do not put these options. Just put it in lines or a space. No? It will make them think that, okay, probably the researcher is asking me to narrate something or, write something here. So, magiging unstructured na yun siya. So, the main difference talaga is that you are giving predefined options. Okay? Ito naman ang example ng unstructured questionnaire. So, you can see, tulad ng sinabi natin kanina, no? Ayan. Binigyan niya lang ng space for writing or narration ang kanyang respondents. So, free ang respondent ngayon na magsulat ng kanyang thoughts, ng kanyang opinion, and whatever it is that he or she wants to answer. So, advantages of using a questionnaire. First, the data can be quickly gathered from a big number of participants. And also, actually, in comparison to interviews, it is much easier to use questionnaire. Imagine mo pag nag-i-interview ka, some people don't like to speak outward, no? Or to talk to somebody who are strangers. You're a researcher. Not all of your respondents you know personally, right? And also, hindi mawala agad yung data. Kasi nga, nakasulat siya sa isang questionnaire. Nasa questionnaire siya. In some interviews, if you really want to gather data using interviews or face-to-face interviews, ganyan, you really have to record the interview. Kasi that is your way to ensure that you never lose your data. Okay? Next, the participants are encouraged to be open to the researchers since their identity can be made anonymous. And aside from that, you know how you like it when you just write things instead of say them out loud. Diba, no? So, mas maganda kung nagsusulat ka lang. So, that is why they feel comfortable. Okay? So, the disadvantage naman of using a questionnaire is first, the questions can be interpreted differently by the participants. Since they are the ones reading the question and they are the ones interpreting the question, they will just sometimes na may misunderstood, no, ang iyong question. That is why, going back to the previous reminder natin kanina, you have to make your questions really clear, okay? And then, some participants will not be able to complete the required responses. But, okay, this happens in face-to-face, no? Na pagbigay mo ng questionnaire. Sometimes, hindi enough yung time. But for those people who will be using Google Forms, you can actually make each question or each item required para hindi sila makamove on to the next question without answering the first item. Okay? So, some questionnaires will not be returned on time. Yes. Especially kung binigyan mo sila ng freedom na, i-take home yung questionnaire. So, that will be hard. Okay? Next is some questionnaires will be lost. Yes. This happened a lot last year. And, yeah, good luck na lang. But for Google Forms, at least everything is online, no? So, that will give you some advantage. Okay? And lastly, the answers from participants may lack depth. So, depende. Kung unstructured ang ginagamit mo na, na questions, there may be sometimes that the participant's answer may lack depth. Okay? Next, tests. Ang tests naman ay used for assessing various skills and types of behavior as well as for describing some characteristics. So, we have two types, standardized at saka non-standardized test. Ang standardized test uniformly scored across different areas and groups. Usually, ina-administer ito ng mga institutions to assess a wide range of groups such as students and test takers. Like, for example, achievement test, NKE, NAT, university entrance exam, personality tests, and others. Non-standardized test naman may not be scored uniformly. It is administered to a certain set of people. Or, it might be a questionnaire na kaka-develop pa lang at hindi pa siya nag-undergone ng reliability test, ng content validity, and other tests that will ensure the validity, reliability, and usability of the test questionnaire. So, we have different types of test questions. First is the recall questions. It requires participants to retrieve information from memory. Like for example, sa unahan ng test papers ninyo, usually, right? Like memory test muna, either fill in the blank, identification ba yan, enumeration, So those are recall questions. Next, we have recognition questions. It provides respondents with choices of the best or correct choice. So either multiple choice ba yan, true or false, or yes or no na test. This also includes inductive reasoning or logic. Like, for example, nakatest na ba kayo nung there are specific pictures and then hulaan mo kung ano yung kasunod, or there is a pattern and hulaan mo yung kasunod, or maybe number sequence and then hulaan mo yung kasunod. Not exactly hulaan, but ano ang kasunod. Okay, sagutin mo kung ano ang sunod. Okay, that is recognition question. Next, we have open-ended questions. Ito ang mga, parang unstructured question siya. It is open-ended. So, you can answer it by narrating something or magkwento ka, ng mga bagay-bagay. So, you can answer by writing an essay and other performance-based tests. So, you have to perform something perhaps, Ganon ang open-ended questions. Now, next, we have an interview. A quantitative interview is a method of collecting data about an individual's behaviors, opinions, values, emotions, and demographic characteristics using numerical data. Just like gender, salary, age, civil status, and whatnot, have you been interviewed by a DSWD worker? Pag nagsisensus sila ng mga bahay. I'm not sure kung na-interview na kayo ng DSWD, but that is what we call quantitative interview. They ask you ilang tao sa bahay, sino ang nagtatrabaho, alin ang underage, and certain things, demographics, and other characteristics within a family unit. Okay? So, quantitative versus qualitative interviews because na nag-i-interview din sa qualitative research, right? Sa quantitative, it uses close-ended questions. It contains a rating scale or rubric. Meron pa rin siyang scale talaga. Okay? And responses are usually numerical. A large sample size is used so that mas accurate ang makukuha na results. And then, structured type is used to minimize interviewer effect. Because sometimes, kung sobrang haba ng question mo and kailangan ng kwento na sagot galing from the participant, a lot of data will be lost there or will be misinterpreted. Okay? So, dapat structured lang ng mga question ang gamit sa quantitative interviews. Now, in qualitative, it uses open-ended questions. You can simply just input an essay And the researcher will later on find patterns for that. And even, you can have one respondent, unstructured or semi-structured usually ang ginagamit na questions. Informal ang interviews and focus group discussions are usually used as well. So the main difference between a quantitative questionnaire versus quantitative interviews. Ang quantitative interviews, although pareho sila na structured questions ang ginagamit, sa quantitative interview, items are read to the participants. Researchers may ask follow-up questions if needed. Okay? So face-to-face kayo nung ini-interview mo, meron ka pa ring hawak na questionnaire and you are going to read the questions to the participant. And for example, if you needed more information, then you can go ahead and ask follow-up questions. This is useful when the target participants cannot answer a printed or encoded questionnaire. Okay? Next, ang kaibahan naman niya sa quantitative questionnaire is that, of course, the participant is on their own. They are going to read the questionnaire and they're going to answer it. Researchers may not ask follow-up questions because what is in the questionnaire, that is it. Okay, ganun ang quantitative questionnaire. And this is not applicable for people that are not able to answer questionnaires, no? So, kung meron kang mga respondents na ganun, you better use quantitative interviews. Last type of collection method under quantitative research instruments is observation. So what is an observation? It allows the researcher to observe the actual event or phenomenon. It has greater flexibility in the observation method. It is usually done in laboratory, experimental, and quantitative research. So there are forms of observation. First, controlled observation. This is usually used in experimental research and is done under a standard procedure. So just like what we have discussed before as well, if you are going to do something in the laboratory or if you have an experimental design, of course, restricted ang mga bagay-bagay and ginalimit mo ang mga factors. You even try to put some variables at constant para lang makita mo talaga yung totoong effect ng independent variable towards the dependent variable. And that is what we call controlled observation. Next is the natural observation. It is carried out in a non-controlled setting. It has greater ecological validity. So, which means flexibility of the findings to be generalized to real-life context. Although mahirap lang siya in a way na since you don't have control over things, there may be a lot of factors that will be involved in the data gathering. So, ang daming factors na kailangan i-consider when you are using natural observation. Last but not least is participant observation. It allows the observer to become a member of the group or community that the participants belong to. It has two types. First, covertly, and then second, overtly. Ang covertly is participants are not aware of the purpose behind the observation, although they know that they are being observed, pero hindi nila alam kung ano yung purpose. For example, if the school's district superintendent, suddenly visits a school, and then, alam ng mga estudyante na, may bisita, ganyan. But, they don't know the specific purpose of the visit, that there is going to be an observation. So, that is covertly participant observation. Okay? Ang overtly naman is participants know the intention or objectives of the observation. So, for example, pag nagde-demo ang teacher, and then somebody else is observing, of course, you know that the purpose of that observation is to observe the demonstration of that particular teacher. Tama man. And so you try to behave, well. I think that is the the disadvantage of overtly na overt na participant observation because kasi medyo tarnished na yung data, no. So, but anyway, still it's being used in a wide variety of research studies. So moving on, we have ethical consideration. So first, you have to write an informed consent. Okay. Tulad nga ng sinabi ko dati, pag gagamit kayo ng questionnaire, input everything, the title, the statement of the problem, the purpose of the study, and of course, the data privacy disclaimer that you are only going to use the information that you have gathered for your research study purposes. Wala ka ng ibang paggagamitan ng data na nag-gather mo from the participants. Okay? So, you have to write an informed consent. Okay? And also, data privacy, yun na nga, no? Aside from informing the respondents or the participants of data privacy, ikaw rin mismo bilang isang researcher, kailangan ikaw ay responsible. Okay? Pag may nakita ka na mga sensitive dyan na data, and, like, name, edad, birthday, address, salary, wag wag mong, ipagkalat ang information or wag mong i-post, wag ganun, okay? Just please don't. Also, sensitive topics yun na nga, religion, political views, salary, etc. Wag natin ipagkalat, wag i-post, and just don't, okay? Anyway, that's the end of this module, guys. I hope by next week, please, isubmit nyo na yung mga questionnaire ninyo if you have, or if you're going to use standardized test, coming from other research papers, then please let me see them at least before you conduct your study. Well, thank you so much for watching the video lesson. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to PM me or post a question on our group chat. Okay? So, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.